Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving, purpose-minded women who've written nonfiction books and want to amplify their message beyond the book. I'm a college professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to use their books to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and purpose. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. So glad you're here and listening into the podcast. I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy day life and schedule to listen into the podcast. And I especially am grateful for you helping us to become in the top 10 podcasts of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. Really appreciate you. And today I'm talking with Carla Sridevi Cohen. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Carla. She's the CEO of the Women's Health Revolution and is an author of 2 books, The 10-Minute Face, but the one we're focusing on today is she's the best-selling author of her contribution to a collaborative book, and it's titled Modern Women in the Business World. She's a coach and emotional intelligence expert who is certified in over 25 healing modalities. And as a coach, she helps women overcome career change anxiety so they can move forward from a place of peace. And as a result, her clients let go of stress, pain, fear, and anxiety. And they even call her the Emotional Alchemist. Carla received the Exceptional Global Woman Award in 2022 and was just nominated, and maybe you can say more about this, Carla, was just nominated for the 1 Million Lights campaign. I want to hear more about that. And for her work with helping and inspiring, changing people's lives all around the world. Welcome, Carla Sridevi Cohen.
Wow, that was a great job on that intro. Thank you, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to be a guest on your show.
I'm so glad you're here. So I kind of read your bio there, but why don't you just tell us first a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I had my own health crisis about 35 years ago. I was in Hollywood and I was in a pretty high position. I worked with people like Michael Jackson, George Benson, Rick James, Bette Midler. And that was one part of my life. And I got a little tired of that. Was public relations. And I was working for the largest PR agency in the world. And I got recruited because of something I wrote to another position as a manager of development for a production company. And basically what a development person does, if you don't know, is we're the people who read the books. We summarize books. We write, I would sometimes write scripts. Sometimes I would write what's called a treatment, which is like a mini script that you submit to sell to a movie studio. And I loved the job. It was really cool. It was like a great opportunity. Of course, I jumped because I was ready for a change. And the people that own my company, they were pretty famous. One of the productions that we did was called Webster, which you probably heard of. It was a long time ago, right?
I remember.
I had nothing to do with that particular show, but it was one of our company's productions. So I was there about 6 months. My boss, who I loved, who brought me there, who actually became a friend. I didn't know him before that. He was fired after I was there for 6 months, and my crazy bosses promoted me to his job and then didn't want to pay me the same amount or give me the same title.
Oh.
So I went through something similar when I was in public relations, and I started to think that maybe just I'm not good enough. I'm not cutting it. I don't know. I didn't know how to take it. I kind of internalized it. And basically my answer to that was, well, I'll just work harder. So I started putting in like a 70-hour work week, which eventually led to me starting to fall asleep a little bit here and there on my couch while I was reading books. And pretty soon my little naps turned into longer naps. And by the time my body just started quitting, like I just couldn't function, and I think they were going to fire me anyway. And I basically quit. I went to a doctor and they said, we don't know what's going on with you, but you have an elevated white blood cell count that's off the charts, and you have a constant fever, and we don't know how to stop it. And so they did all these tests on me. I ended up in bed for 2 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It was a long time. After being this powerhouse in Hollywood, imagine going from like 99 miles an hour to a full stop. That's basically what happened. So I was pretty weak. The doctors finally, after 2 years of testing, trying different things, they just like, and I finally went to alternative doctors. Nobody was really able to, they put injections in me to try, some pretty weird things to try to help me. And it just wasn't happening. And so, but what turned it around was, well, the last thing the doctor said to me was, "I'm really sorry. We think you're depressed, and we're going to give you these antidepressants to take at home." And I thought, depressed? Well, I wasn't until you told me you couldn't do anything. Then the depression set in. So I'm laughing, but it was a big deal at the time, and it actually sent me into a pretty big spiral. So I went home. I thought, well, I still wanted to believe doctors knew what they were doing, and my parents couldn't help me. The doctors weren't helping me. I'm like, okay, I'll do what he says. So I took one of the pills, and I remember collapsing so weak on the toilet, like I couldn't lift my arms over my head, and I started crying, and it was just like, then I hit this like pit. And I sobbed for quite a while, and a part of me just went, you're going to find a way. You'll find a way, right? So I just spent the time doing personal growth, reading books on spirituality, all kinds of books on self-development, nutrition books, you name it, everything I could think of to try to, and people were bringing me books. My parents actually came over and tried to take care of me a little bit, because my husband up until that point, I was the main wage earner in our family. So it was a pretty big blow. My husband suddenly had to go really get a job. He couldn't play anymore. And because I had nothing left. And so what turned it around was I started to, one day when I was feeling better, I went into I tried a transcendental meditation orientation. And there was an immediate sense of something shifting. And I couldn't articulate it, but I knew it was different. And from there, I just, that was the beginning of me accidentally falling into alternative healing. And in the process of my going in to get healed, actually, the woman who was the first woman who worked on me said, "Your problem is you're not really sick. You're really psychic, and you just don't know how to handle energy. And you've just been like letting yourself be a sponge. And so I want you to be my apprentice." So that's how things started to change. And that was the very, very beginning. And from there, I went on, like you said earlier, I got about 25 different certifications. So that propelled me into, I don't want another woman to have to go through what I went through. And so now I really help them become aware of those emotions that are trapped inside their bodies that they're not consciously connecting with. And a lot of times we're clearing up pain for them. We're clearing up the sense of confusion or anxiety that they're experiencing. And sometimes they go through a career change as a result of me working with them, or, they might tweak it. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that is a journey.
Yes, it was.
Wow, but I'm so glad you made it and you're here on this side of the journey. And not only that, you're helping so many women, you're helping so many people, and changing so many lives. So that's wonderful. And so is this the process that you write about in the modern women in the business world? Or
Well, it's funny, I couldn't, because there's so much. So I had one chapter, and when I start writing, I'm like somebody uncorks a plug. I just go crazy. So I chose to share, and it's so funny because that story has come back around. After I recovered, or near the end of my recovery, because of transcendental meditation, I started having different experiences. I'll call, psychic. I don't know what else to say. There was a man who showed up in my dreams. He showed up in my meditation one day, and he said, "Look, I'm your master teacher." He didn't say, "Look," he said, "I'm your master teacher, and my name is Babaji." And I went, "Okay, I don't know who you are." And I had no point of reference. And he would teach me at night during my dreams, and I would wake up with full recall about what he had said to me. And it was like really profound stuff. And so I felt compelled to try to figure out who he was or where he was or whatever. I couldn't. And I was in Arizona, and I was looking for information on him. And, this book kind of fell on me from one of the shelves. And he had left they call it leaving their body, going on to samadhi. They don't call it dying, because he actually transitioned from this very high state of meditation to whatever, not in the physical body anymore. And the last time he was alive was 12 years earlier. So he had been, what we call dead for 12 years, and he showed up with me, and I'm like, okay, and so then it got to be more interesting, like pulling the threads, like, okay, where does this lead to where does this lead? And so eventually I felt called to go visit where he had materialized in a cave earlier in his lifetime. So, which was up in the Himalayas in a cave, and it was very hard to get to this location. I had it just, the whole story of getting there, that alone, that's a book. Just to, all these underground connections to take me ultimately to, a bus that would take me up into the mountains on these windy roads where there's no guardrails and scary roads, in a rickety Indian bus and no brakes, pretty much, and you could the only way to get into this place was either climb down the mountain with a donkey, you can walk and then they put your luggage on that, or you come in through the river, through the Ganges. You wade through it's like kind of rapids up there. You wade through the rapids to get into the ashram. So I went there, and part of my experience there was I heard about this man who was a renunciate who lived on a hilltop, and his whole mission was just to have God realization. And he'd been there for I don't know how many years. He didn't eat. He was a breatharian. As from all accounts, he didn't have clothing. He lived in like a makeshift tent on the top of the mountain. So the story in the book is about my climb up the mountain. And there's a lot of parallels between that climb and what people go through in their business, in their life, right? The going forward, especially we climbed on shale, which is like pieces of rock that fall apart over and over again. So you would take 10, to climb up 10 feet, fall back 3, climb up 10, you know what I mean? And it's a very arduous process. It was 17 hours of climbing this mountain to get to this man.
17 hours.
So the story is about that experience.
17 hours. Were you with a group of other people who were also on this quest, so to speak?
Seeking? Yeah. So not a lot. There were 4 of us that decided to go. The woman it was very interesting on this too. There's one other just little side note. I gave up several times climbing this mountain. I broke down in tears. It was we're talking first just to wade across the Ganges River to get from one side to the other. Okay. At the place where it's kind of like rapids and you could die. So, and then you get to the other side and they're like, oh yeah, be careful. Don't go over there because that's where the tigers hang out. And, we can't really protect you. And then, there's monkeys on the side of the hill.
Wow.
And it was just like, it's like this journey, right? And you go through this process of, can I turn around and go back? And the answer is no, because you're not really safe by yourself.
Right.
And so for me, it was like, okay, I don't feel like I can go forward, and I know I can't go back. and this is what women go through as entrepreneurs, which is why it's so fun for me to work with them. It's like, oh, I know this story. This is what I went through on the mountain, right? So anyway, there was this one woman who kept encouraging me on the climb, and she'd say, don't worry, you could do it, Sridevi, and I wasn't called Sridevi at that time, but that's how I refer to myself now. And I'm like, no, I can't. And she'd be like, come on, just 10 more steps, just 5 more, just, you could do it. You could do it. And she was sort of my encourager, and I would break down, and then I would encourage her a little bit because she didn't break down as bad, but she would also, when we got to the very top of the mountain, what was so interesting is this woman it was really the reason I made it. They told us we had to take our shoes off because it was holy land, and that, and you could see there were thistles and thorns and rocks, and, it wasn't smooth. And that was where she gave up. She got to the top and sat on a rock and wouldn't take her shoes off because she just didn't have it in her. And I continued the next, I think it was about 1,000 feet, maybe a little bit more, to get to where he was. Absolutely worth it. And I did it with bare feet. But it's just kind of like so interesting because if you think of the parallels in life, right? Those people that push us along and drive us to a higher achievement, and then, maybe they don't make it themselves, but they're responsible for getting you there, right?
Yes.
Lifting you up. So
That is powerful. That is a powerful story. Now I'm thinking about the 17 hours. Were there times when you could pause? I mean, I know you had to climb, but were there stations where you could be still and pause and refresh for water, food, or anything to continue on the journey for the
that's
17?
such a great question. So the Sherpas basically said to us, look, you can't eat or drink unless we tell you to. That's, if you want to survive this and not get sick, you need to listen to us. So that's what we did. So I remember sitting down twice where we took a break. First time was, I think it was just to have a sip of water. And then the second time, we were pretty high up at that point. And I remember it's kind of funny. I remember looking and oh, we're almost there. I looked and I pointed, that's the mountain, right? And the Sherpa looks at me and he goes, no, Missy, that's the mountain, the one that was way higher behind it, And it was like this moment where I went, oh God, there was that moment of elation and then deflation. It was like, so definitely a memorable experience, And then of course, when we got to the top, and even though they said he doesn't eat, I did bring him like an offering of some food, and he didn't come out of his tent. You just saw hands because he didn't wear clothing, right? So, and and I brought him a hat because it was supposed to be cold up there. And I thought, well, maybe he wears a hat. I don't know. But, it was so interesting. When we were outside of his tent, I just remember him singing, and I don't even know what the songs were. And I remember just feeling like so elevated, like I got super high from the energy. And so whatever he had, cultivated there, and it was actually a very profound experience. But would I do it again? I don't know that I would do that to myself again. I mean, I can't now at this stage in my life. I don't think. I'd have to take a lot of training,
And it doesn't sound like the kind of thing that is even necessary. I mean, it's so powerful to do the work and the lessons and the learn and live the life
right.
from one journey. I imagine it would be enough.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So now I'm interested in some of how you translated some of those lessons from that journey, that powerful journey, into the work you're doing, especially with the modern women in the business world or otherwise, like some of the parallels.
Yeah. So the parallels are, a lot of the women who are reading that book, was primarily for female entrepreneurs, right? Who, first of all, being a woman in business, whether you're working in the corporate world or whether you're an entrepreneur, it's challenging. All my years in Hollywood taught me that it didn't matter how good I was or how hard I worked, because it basically, man's world. You know what I mean? My boss, and it's also, well, anyway, I guess I don't want to go off on that tangent, but I will just say that it was very disheartening. And there were women in PR that made it, to the top of the ranks. But so there's that piece of like, okay, there's not a lot of us. I have to, you want to think the world is fair, and fairness has nothing to do with it. It's not about how hard you work, it's not about luck necessarily either. It's just about, are the circumstances around you conducive to helping elevate you up to leadership? But so in the journey of the mountain, it's like that thing about, I want to climb up to the top, and then all these pieces where somebody doesn't promote you, you slide backwards. Somebody doesn't give you the wage, you slide backwards, right? You take a rest. Or you make a resolve. I'm never going to go through this again. I'll be fine. You climb some more. And then what happens is a similar situation comes along or something like that pulls you back. So it is very much the emotional and physical journey, because whatever it goes on emotionally, that's the premise of the work I do now. It affects you physiologically. We are, and emotions vibrate. This is science. It's not me making up anything. Emotions vibrate. They create a magnetizing force around us for the things, people, places, and things that we are supposed to experience. When we change that internal vibration, we change our external experience. And so now, as thinking back on that experience where It's do what they tell you to do, one foot in front of the other, go to the front. And it is good as an entrepreneur to think, okay, I can't go backwards. I can't quit. Because sometimes we need that. It's like, okay, what happens if you know you can't do that other plan? You're going to do everything in your power to try to make your business a success, right?
Yes.
It's like I had to pull every ounce of energy to get to the top of that mountain. So I think the mountain taught me about that. The mountain also taught me about cultivating, and this is an emotional intelligence principle too. I've gone through so many levels of certification in that, but the idea of utilizing our optimism to get us to where we need to go. Like, can you be more, what could you draw from in positivity that's going to take you, reignite your passion and make you want to go to where you're supposed to go? Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Yeah.
And especially for someone with my personality and temperament, for whom it's easy to be an optimist. I kind of was born on the bright side of life. I see the good and it's easy for me to spot it. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
All right. So now the podcast, I don't know if we talked about this before we started recording, but the podcast, when I created it, I said, I'm going to create a podcast for what I'm calling high achieving women. Now, this is what I mean by high achieving women. Women who are ambitious, professional, business in career or own business, but they're the ones that are good at a few things, successful. And they're always the ones that people come to them in their professional life and their personal life. So they're the responsible ones. They're the go-to person in various ways. And so I thought to myself, they're doing all that. Who supports them while they're basically supporting everybody else? So the intent of the podcast was, I'll create a podcast, invite those women to talk, and we can kind of talk to each other. And so no matter what background the guest comes from in terms of the profession and business, we all have something that we've learned from our life or work that we can share with other high achieving women. And so recently, in this is the second season of the podcast, the second season, I added the piece to that same woman, but now she's written a nonfiction book. So in addition to all the things she's doing, I'm like, let's think about this author role in the midst of all of that. So that's who we're talking to now. So now with that in mind, what's something from your professional life or personal life or any area of your experience or expertise? What's a piece of advice to this woman, high achieving woman who's an author, and she is now trying to get her book out into the world? So this idea of promoting your own thoughts and your own way of being and experience in a book and getting it out there. So anything related to that, what would you say to her?
Yeah. So I think, like with my first book, one of the things I did was I started a roots, like a sort of a ground roots or whatever it's called, grassroots, there you go, movement with the 10-minute face. Like I made t-shirts, I gave them out to a few of my friends. And my friends, I also featured some of their stories in the back of my book because it helped and it made it more interesting, right? And then what happened was because they were in the book, they wanted to help promote it. So that was one thing I did that was incredibly smart, and I don't know where that idea came from, but anyway, so that was a good thing. Now, one of the other roles that I have is I am the regional director for Global Woman in Orange County, but I'm connected to a much larger organization, and as a result of actually through my connections that I have, I actually help women raise their visibility, with their books or whatever it is they want to promote, and help them, because really what it is you need to raise your visibility overall, your digital footprint, if you will. People need to see you out there in the media. It can't be just, book tours can help, but it's really about these days, it's about the battle for the media. It's the battle for being on the front of the magazine. It's the battle for the feature articles, and we have all of those things now in place within our organization to help women, because we get a lot of women who are just maybe writing their first book, or maybe they're just starting their first venture as an entrepreneur, or maybe they haven't done that, but they're thinking about it, so they join so they could be around other entrepreneurs. And then we have people that are already very successful, right? So media presence, and this also comes from my PR background. Media is key, So, and this is a nice, wonderful, effective little package to help. I've seen women come with nothing and turn into, we've helped edify them into, international speakers as a result of being associated. The other thing is, like this, there are other, your podcast is awesome. There are, and there are other, getting out there and being a podcast guest can certainly be helpful. If you have, you have this topic, turning it into a course, I think you help people do that, Robin, right?
I do.
Yeah, so that's valuable. So you guys should all talk to Robin. Take the book and turn it into something that's teachable, so women actually have a pragmatic way to use that information. They, and that's the whole thing. Like in emotional intelligence, when we teach, it's all about helping people connect the dots so that they might have a concept, but when they have an experience of the concept, in other words, taking it from concept to turning it into a course, when you start to do that, that's when you start to get some momentum, depending upon. And another thing you can do, which could be cool, is, and I don't know if you teach this in your course, but you could do some little, blurbs on your own podcast, right? Or some where you, I love this one, on YouTube, do a little information on each of the chapters or the things you want people to take away. As people start to get exposed to you there and on platforms like maybe, I don't know, Facebook or depending on your audience, TikTok. I'm not very good at social media, so I'm not the person to ask about this, but definitely YouTube, and you can share little lessons from your book so that people start to get a sense of you and what you have to offer. And I think that's good. And from there, you can get maybe invitations to speak or have somebody help you with that. But that's what I feel. It's like, it's ultimately about creating word of mouth, wagging tongues, as they say, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, now let me ask you about your clients call you the emotional alchemist. Now, from the emotional alchemist point of view, what would you say to that same woman we were just talking about?
Oh my God, thank you for asking that. Yeah, that is so powerful. So the story of my book, which I don't think we have time for, my first book, The 10-Minute Face. But when I wrote that book, I wrote it, and then all the terror came in. I call it the terror barrier, right? A lot of women experience this. It's this place where you go and you do something and then you freeze, right? So I wrote the book. It was all written. I even had it, I had a graphics person. At that point, I had a graphics person. I had it laid out. It looked amazing. And I couldn't get myself to pull the trigger to publish. And I couldn't do that because all my terror was there. And that's what stops people, right? The fear. My book isn't good enough. Who's going to read my book? Oh my God, what was I thinking when I wrote this? All that kind of, stuff that we deal with. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. It's not perfect. Okay, I think I pretty much covered most of the most common ones, right?
Yes.
So those are the result of trapped emotions in the body. So so for every emotion, and this is based on research, every emotion can generate at least between 10 and 12,000 thoughts.
Wow.
So the work that I do with women now is to resolve those emotions. So that's what happened to me. I had to resolve the emotion before I could go to publish. Right? Mm-hmm. And then once I did that, I was like a bat out of a cage. I just went crazy. But that was all I had, was that I had this one, it was a big, nobody cares. Nobody's going to want to read this. Even though I had all this evidence around me showing, that's why I wrote the book, because there were all these women going through the same doubts. At the time, it was I was being introduced to a new product. I was supposed to lead women in how to use this. I didn't realize they were going to tell me to guide women in makeup. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. What do you. And I looked around the table and I'm like, these women probably know more than I do. They all looked amazing, right? And some of them were heavily makeup, and you come to a makeup thing to try makeup, and I think people wouldn't wear makeup, but they did. So and luckily there was a woman who was a makeup artist at my table, and I said, hey, can you help me out? And she was so happy to share. So she did. But that's what happened, is oh my God, all these beautiful women are also insecure about their makeup, right? 3:00 in the morning, I woke up with this, I gotta write this book, because I'm not the only one. It was, so but the thing was, I went into this trap of, just before publishing, about nobody cares. But I had just had this evidence right in front of me, right? Like, hello.
Yeah.
So anyway, and the book was really well received. I mean, it did really, really well. And I did all of it myself. I did self-publishing. Now you always have the option of, there's a lot of these companies that do publishing are ripoffs. So I'm just going to say that, like, they'll see a bunch of self-publishing companies and it's a great way to get money out of you. You have to be really careful, do your due diligence. So that would be another thing. But back to the whole thing about the emotional content, that is what holds us back. That's what also the difference between maybe, promoting the book or maybe having the book even get better. If somebody's trying to give you feedback, I gave my book out to like 5 or 6 of my friends and was scared to death. And I said, look, could you read this? And just, if you have any suggestions, let me know. And some people went to town. Oh my God, this paragraph should be, some people were like, oh no, I really like it. Just add some, they'd have add a comma or a pair, or oh, here's a spelling error, right? Well, that was another thing. I think it was a good move in the end, but it did put me through another spiral for a little bit, because all that, I don't know that I wanted it. I wanted to hear the feedback, but it also was like a lot to try to process, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you need to be prepared for that as well as an author, because not everybody's gonna, I mean, it's funny. I had on my LinkedIn, somebody just caught that I had an extra E. It had 3 E's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody actually wrote me and said, you're spelling on the word between on your on your profile. I was like, thank you. You're the woman who tells people when you have lettuce between your teeth, which is great, or spinach, But like a lot of times people can't take that feedback, even if it's constructive, right? Mm-hmm. So again, that's an emotional baggage. That's a reaction. And so when we heal the emotions, we can react, we can respond instead of react.
Yes.
We'll take it in and go, okay, there was no energy on that. That was just like somebody trying to help me.
Yes.
And then, and do it that way. So I would say, if you can, resolving the emotional material, getting a good support system. And then, like I was saying, give it out to your friends and, be willing to, you might have to cry for a couple of days, but let your friends, especially the ones you respect that you think are reasonably literate, ask them, hey, would you just take a look at this? I'd love to hear your feedback, and maybe be specific about what kind of feedback you want. That would be good too, because I just was like, here,
Right. Yeah. Well, you certainly shared a wealth of information with your journey and all that. Let me just ask you one last question, because this is the Leadership Purpose podcast. So what's your thinking? Do you think it's important for people to have a sense of purpose in their work or not? And if so, why? If not, why not?
Yeah. No, I think you absolutely have to have a reason. You have to have a purpose, and you have to, because if you don't have a purpose, you won't have the passion. You need the passion to drive your energy so that you can keep going. Otherwise, you'll be just, you will stop at some point. And it's like, what am I doing this for? This is what happens. Like people who take, and this is not meant as a judgment or anything, but people who take a 9-to-5 job and they're like miserable their whole life. There are people who live 20 something years at the same job. They're unhappy 20 something years because their thought is, I have to work to feed my family, or I have to work to survive. That is not, I understand it and I've been there, but looking back now, I would say, don't let that be the drive, because if you look at this, we don't know for sure. We may only have one life. Is that really what you think you were here to do, was to maybe it is, but maybe what if it isn't? Yeah. Did you even give yourself a chance? And sometimes our economics dictate that, right? Like not everybody was raised in, a family where there were resources.
Right.
But the thing that shifts that is starting to get around people who are successful, who are thinking at a higher level. And really that whole thing about association, right? Like you need to, if you want to be better, hang around people that are doing better, and don't pray for it to be easier, pray to be better, because that's really all it is. It's about, I believe the reason we're here is for self-improvement. I don't think it's that complicated, and hopefully to contribute.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So, yeah, but I think, does that answer the question
it
about?
does. It
Yeah.
does. It does answer the question. And I mean, I think we can't get any better ending than that. Self-improvement and make a contribution. Really
Mhm.
appreciate your wisdom and insights. And I'm still thinking about that amazing story. I'll have to go back to this episode again and even listen to that story you've gone through. So thank you for taking time. I know you have a conference coming up and you have lots of busy things that you're doing. And so thank you for taking time out today to spend time on the podcast and talk with us. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. And, I just want to encourage your viewers too, if you get a chance, you can find me. If you just womenshealthrevolution.com, and it's WOMENS, not woman, women's, you can see a little bit more about, some of the things that I've done or what I do now, and, and get a better sense. And I really want to thank you for having me. I think that the work that you're doing with this podcast is going to help a lot of women, and I'm sure it already has. And it's been a real privilege to get to know you today, Robin. Thank you for having me in.
Thank you. It was my honor and privilege as well. All right, everyone. And for sure, we'll put that in the show notes. Womenshealthrevolution.com. Womenshealthrevolution.com. All right. And so everybody, you can see that in the show notes. And if you want more from me, you can find me on my website, robinlowens.com, robinlowens.com. And if you're one of those authors who've written a book and you've been thinking about creating a course based on that book, here's your opportunity. Head on over to createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com. And there you'll find a free video training to get you on your way. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.